Have you ever fallen victim to those mind-numbingly generic YouTube videos with unknown facts about movies? You know, the ones where every single revelation is about as groundbreaking as learning water is wet.
I've seen this one. I've seen this one. This is a classic.
The kind of content that makes you wonder who the writes this
Who do you think? The
I don't think so, Doc. Well, here at Vinyl and Celluloid, I don't just regurgitate Wikipedia trivia. No, I'm an archaeological investigator of cinema, unearthing the deliciously twisted backstories that lurk beneath Hollywood's glossy veneer. And with the 40th anniversary of Back to the Future approaching, I'm about to take you on a journey more unpredictable than a DeLorean time jump. Sure, most see Back to the Future as a beloved 80s classic, a shiny, optimistic adventure about teenage dreams and improbable physics. But what if I told you there's actually more to it when it comes to this masterpiece? A film that casually explores grooming dynamics and the relationship between men and teens, a provocative title that raises awareness about the dangers of incest, a movie that shows that violence is the most impactful solution to most of our problems, and a motivational piece that extols the power of self-belief as the ultimate life hack.
Like I've always told you, you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything.
And ultimately defines success in life through materialism and the presence of pastel colors. Oh, we're going there. And trust me, the original concepts for this film were so radically different that they would have made the current version look like a Disney Sunday special. 5 facts, 40 years of secrets, and explosive revelations more powerful than 1.21 gigawatts. Are you ready to have everything you thought you knew about time travel disrupted? The DeLorean that almost wasn't. Imagine a world where Marty McFly doesn't cruise through time in a sleek DeLorean. Well, that almost happened. It's a well-known fact that the concept for the time machine went through several iterations. It started as a laser device, then it was a refrigerator, but we know nothing good has ever come out of using refrigerators as plot devices. Finally, in its last iteration, creatives agreed on a car. But sadly, everyone in Hollywood is a creative with ideas. Universal's CEO at the time, Sid Sheinberg, certainly had his own, let's charitably call them creative visions. He presented screenwriters Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis' demands so bizarre that they'd make a Hollywood exec today spit out their matcha latte. These included Doc having a pet monkey named Rocco, and the movie to be called Spaceman from Pluto. When Gale and Zemeckis, along with producer Steven Spielberg, laughed in his face, scoffing his ideas, Sheinberg threatened to cut Universal's support, which led Spielberg and Zemeckis to find additional financing through a product placement deal focused on the movie's vehicle. The 80s were the golden age of product placement, and this was going to be a bidding war unlike any other. The creative brainpower behind the time-traveling classic was flooded with bids and proposals submitted both from the US and overseas. From Italy came passionate pitches for the Alfa Romeo Milano and the Maserati Biturbo, because nothing says American blockbuster like Italian automotive elegance. Yugoslavia's Zastava Automobiles saw an opportunity to expand its global presence and get its hands on some hard foreign currency, lobbying hard for the Yugo 45, a car that would become legendary for all the wrong reasons. And a big campaign from Ford enticing the use of a converted country squire station wagon was seen 2 years before in another major movie. That idea was immediately rejected.
Say goodbye to the old gas guzzler, Russ.
See you later.
Before any final decision was made, Sheinberg, in a moment of what can only be described as strategic compromise, proposed a deal. He dropped all his other demands if they named the female lead Lorraine, after his wife Lorraine Gary, and used the DeLorean as a time machine. Why a DeLorean? Because the CEO thought the car was neat. And then, as they say, history was made. Oh, and by the way, before Scheinberg's reasonable agreement, Spielberg and Zemeckis had already chosen a vehicle that would stand in for the time machine. The name of the car?
Let's see if you bastards can do 90.
Llegó el japonés, Toyota Corolla, bonito como el sol y jala como un campeón.
Now that would have been a different movie entirely. And speaking of differences, let's get on to the next item on the list. A different sound for Back to the Future. Few soundtracks have captured our imagination quite like Back to the Future. Alan Silvestri's score is nothing short of legendary. Those soaring orchestral themes that make your heart race faster than a DeLorean heading 88 miles per hour? Pure cinematic magic. A score so brilliant, it should have been handed an Oscar with a standing ovation. But before Silvestri's symphonic time machine, there was another musical mastermind waiting in the wings. Before we get there, let me acknowledge the importance music plays in the whole trilogy. The three movies boast an eclectic non-instrumental set of tracks, courtesy of the likes of Huey Lewis and the News, Eric Clapton, Lindsey Buckingham, Sammy Hagar, and ZZ Top. Huey Lewis himself even has a brief cameo in the original, as do ZZ Top in Part 3, and Red Hot Chili Peppers bassman Flea played the role of Marty McFly's frenemy Needles in the second and third installments. But, as I was saying, the musical journey of this film was supposed to take a completely different route.
It's got what it takes. So tell me why can't this be love?
Yes, that Van Halen, masters of rock, kings of the 80s, whose guitar riffs could potentially time travel on their own. If you notice that cheeky Eddie Van Halen tape casually used by Marty McFly, well, that wasn't just set decoration, that was a hint. A musical Easter egg suggesting something far more radical was originally planned. The band was fully signed, the deal was set. Imagine a Back to the Future scored not with orchestral sweeps, but with face-melting guitar solos and rock anthems that could literally bend time and space. But then came David Lee Roth, the band's frontman, the man, the myth, the spandex-wearing legend, who would derail an entire movie's musical destiny over something in the script. Want to know exactly what made Roth pull the plug? Buckle up, because this scene is about to get wild.
All right, guys, listen, this is the blues riff and B. Watch me for the changes and try and keep up, okay?
Eddie, it's Marvin, your cousin Marvin Van Halen. Remember that new sound you were looking for? Well, listen to this.
Such ridicule offended Roth, and he forced the band and its lead figure, Eddie Van Halen himself, to drop the agreement.
I guess you guys aren't ready for that yet. But your kids are gonna love it.
One can only wonder what sonic landscape Van Halen would have created. A soundtrack that wouldn't just accompany a time travel adventure, but potentially redefine what a film score could be. And speaking of radical decisions, we move on to the third bit of trivia on the list. Back to the Future's political overtones. The 1985 box office champion may seem innocuous enough, but if you dig just a bit, you'll find strong political undertones.
What?
That's right, Lorraine. On the surface, it's a peppy 80s adventure about a kid, a mad scientist, and a car that breaks the laws of physics. But you look a little deeper and find a cinematic Trojan horse packed with more political subtext than a college freshman's first sociology paper. From Huey Lewis' socialist views on subsidized public transport
Don't need no credit card to ride this train.
to Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis' evident take on the Zimbabwe War of Independence, which led them to appropriate the military wing's slogan,
Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
and even mocking then U.S. President Ronald Reagan.
Who's president of the United States in 1985?
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan, the actor? Then who's vice president? Bonzo? I suppose Jane Wyman is a first lady.
Not quite, Doc, not quite. And even the sequel portraying Biff Tannen as a stand-in for Donald Trump.
Great flick! Great friggin' flick!
Subtle? No. Brilliant? Absolutely. But here's where things get truly wild. For all its progressive pretensions, the original script was a minefield of problematic representations that would make a modern-day diversity consultant have a complete nervous breakdown. Case in point, the original script featured an encounter with Marty's Cholo cousin, Martin.
Hey, puto!
But the most glaring example is the original subplot centered around Goldie Wilson's character.
That's right, he's gonna be a pimp.
Yaman!
Bam!
Now that's a good idea. I could become a pimp.
That colored pimp, that'll be the day.
You wait and see, Mr. Carruthers. I will be a pimp, and I'm gonna have the finest honeys in Hill Valley.
Goldie?
Enter a young Universal intern by the name of Kathy Kennedy, who would become a pivotal behind-the-scenes force. She approached Zemeckis and Gale, and the plot was ultimately changed at her request. But her contributions didn't stop there. In 1988, she did some script revisions for the sequel Back to the Future 2 and advised the creative team to turn Marty McFly's youngest son, George McFly Jr., into a trans woman that went by the name of Marlene. Decades before, such representation was mainstream. One small script revision for Universal, one giant leap for representational storytelling. And if you think these stakes are dark, you'll want to stick around to find out how deep this rabbit hole goes, because this story is about to hit 88 miles per hour. Doc's shady past. Listen closely, because the story of Doc Emmett Brown is about to get darker than a plutonium-powered time machine on a moonless night. There has been much speculation about Doc Brown's origins. We all know him as the wild-haired, eccentric scientist who turns DeLoreans into time-traveling legends. But what if I told you his backstory reads like a Cold War thriller crossed with a Nazi recruitment pamphlet? In Back to the Future Part 3, when Doc casually drops that his family was originally known as Von Braun, it's not just a throwaway line. It's a historical breadcrumb that leads down to an inconvenient truth, to put it mildly. Helmut von Braun, not just a name, but a link to one of the most controversial scientific legacies of the 20th century. Cousin to Werner von Braun, the rocket scientist who went from developing weapons for Nazi Germany to becoming an American space program hero. Talk about a career pivot. The original script whispered an even more complicated narrative. Helmut wasn't just a peripheral character in the Nazi scientific machine. He was a project lead, a prominent figure in military ranks who was then swept up in Operation Paperclip, that morally questionable US government program that essentially said, hey, we'll overlook your entire past if you help us build rockets. The government's solution, Planning in Hill Valley, because nothing says rehabilitation like suburban California. Here's the take from the original script. Marty: this is heavy duty, Doc. This is great. Marty still holding the camera. Does this run on like regular unleaded gasoline? Doc stares back at Marty. Doc Brown: unfortunately, no. It requires something with more kick. Plutonium. Doc resumes his preparation for the time travel. Marty: plutonium? Are you telling me that this sucker is nuclear? Doc looks back with a pensive look. Doc Brown: electrical, but I need a nuclear reaction to generate the 1.21 gigawatts of electricity needed. Marty puts down the camera and looks confused. Doc Brown: if my beloved cousin Werner were alive to witness this moment. We accomplished so much, but then the Americans. As Marty looks at Doc with a confused stare, a chill runs through his spine. Marty: what? Doc: we were meant to achieve great things. Wir wollen das Vaterland zu einem Zentrum für Pioniere und Visionäre machen. Doc approaches Marty and grabs him by the collar. He smiles with pride. Marty: are you telling me you were a nut? Doc covers Marty's mouth. Doc: I was a revolutionary. I did not buy into any of the ideological nonsense, but greatness comes at a cost.
Whoa, this is heavy.
You said it, Marty. But here's where it gets truly fascinating. Doc's family wealth explained through a brother working at a Swiss bank before the family fled Europe under mysterious circumstances. And by mysterious, I mean the kind of circumstances that involve complicated international transfer of assets and questionable wartime connections. Yet amid this potential darkness, a glimmer of humanity. Doc's profound admiration for Albert Einstein, so much so that he names his canine companion after the renowned physicist. A subtle act of redemption, perhaps? One small detail changed the entire narrative. One decision transformed a potential war criminal's descendant into America's most beloved time-traveling eccentric. And still on Doc's background, we get to the final bit of trivia on this list: Doc and Marty's dark relationship. If the last point covered Doc's past, this one focuses on his present-day activities. Let's talk about the elephant in the time machine: the relationship between Doc Brown and Marty McFly. The topic is never addressed and no explanation is given. I mean, why would a teen hang out with a much older, reclusive old man?
What the hell is going on here?
You got that right, Biff. The answer is far more sinister than your average coming-of-age friendship. One of the original drafts reveals a much darker origin. Picture this: Marty accidentally stumbling upon Doc at Twin Pines Mall, witnessing him in a shadowy meeting with what can only be described as, well, foreign revolutionaries. Doc, deep in conversation about bomb sales and supporting various, well, let's call them activist groups, shall we? And how does their relationship begin? Blackmail. That's right. Marty doesn't become Doc's friend. He becomes his reluctant financial accomplice by constantly threatening to expose Doc. And everything you witnessed that night, the 1985 Toyota SR5 extra cab, Marty's dream truck, wasn't just a teenage fantasy. It was his silence price, his hush money. So their relationship isn't as clean-cut as it appears, huh? In fact, a closer look at the movie and you'll find hints that Doc Emmett Brown is actually trying to part ways with his blackmailer.
Erased from existence.
First, he tries to electrocute Marty by setting up his equipment so there's a possibility of an overload, then by using his associates to create a diversion and send him as a guinea pig to a certain death in his new highly experimental time-traveling vehicle, even after stating that all of his past experiences failed. These so-called accidents keep falling short of their purpose and have been for years, even pushing Doc into a murder-suicide scenario where the two are hit and killed by the DeLorean. Quite grim. But here's the thing about time travel. Sometimes the most dangerous journey isn't through years or decades. It's the journey between two people who claim to be friends.
I'll keep that in mind.
You'll now see this beloved classic with a new pair of eyes. And remember, things rarely are what they seem.